This is All India Radio. In the program Money Talk, now we bring a discussion on objectives and key provisions of Energy Conservation Amendment Bill. The participants are Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and S. Rangabhashyam, AIR correspondent.
A warm welcome to the program, Mr. Narendra Taneja, to discuss on the Energy Conservation Amendment Bill 2022. The bill was passed by the Lok Sabha in August this year, and yesterday it was passed in the Rajya Sabha as well. For the benefit of our listeners, Mr. Taneja, tell us what is the gist of this particular amendment which has been brought in, the Energy Conservation Amendment Bill 2022.
Well, the gist and the message and the direction is clear. As you know, the energy landscape is a very dynamic landscape. Things are changing practically on every daily basis, in the sense that as economy of the world, economy of India, moves from fossil fuels to renewables. So the landscape is changing, the realities are changing, and therefore it is necessary on the part of the central government to bring about the kind of amendments or the changes required so that, India and Indian industry, Indian society as a whole, and various state governments, they can also move along with the changes and deliver to the people. After all, at the end of the day, of course, without energy, there is no future, whether you are an individual or a society or an industry or a state or a country. So basically, the objective is to bring about the reforms and the changes which are necessary so that, the country can realize its full potential, and the other stakeholders, including, of course, the consumers, can realize their full potential. To give you an example, for instance, when it comes to carbon credit has become a major thing around the world. So how does it function? How to facilitate so that the laws are such that, those involved in this business or those who are the, this end or the other end of the whole thing can benefit from it in a manner which is in accordance with the law, where, for instance, the things can be done in the most transparent manner. Just to give you one example. Other examples are, of course, when it comes to sectors such as construction or building and all that, new codes are developed so the people and the in businesses, they can go along with their plans to have green building. And at the same time, their interests can be protected when it's to consumers, the builders, financials, and everyone. So that's basically, broadly speaking, those kind of changes are being brought in.
Right. And as far as transportation is concerned, which is a major consumer of the fossil fuels, petrol and diesel specifically, this time around in the amendment, even ships and boats have also been included. So that's a major change, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. You see, this is a very forward-looking move now. Forward-looking, as you know, that we also have a massive inland waterways potential. I mean, part of it is already tapped into, but the government wants to tap into inland waterways transport as aggressively as possible so that people can go in different parts of the country using rivers as they used to be. As you know, major cities are all located on the banks of rivers, because in the ancient times, rivers were the main mode of transport. The government idea is to realize that potential. For instance, you can travel by boat from Varanasi to some distant places now already. You can do the same from Allahabad or Prayagraj very soon. So idea is that, these boats can also be using new better sources of energy so that the rivers don't get contaminated or the areas don't get contaminated. So the government has already come out with this initiative. For instance, these boats can be solar powered, they can be hydrogen powered, they can be LNG powered, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, we have got a long coast, which means that, government is promoting shipping along the coast. So if you have to go from, let's say for the sake of discussion, from Maharashtra to Andhra Pradesh, you can go by, of course, by train or by road, but you can also go by ship.
Yeah.
So promoting ship is what is known as the coastal shipping. And at the same time, of course, the ocean shipping, whether you have to go to Southeast Asia or to the Middle East and other parts of the world.
And the bill adds that the government may require designated consumers or customers to meet minimum share of energy consumption from non-fossil fuel sources. So will that percentage be declared in subsequent regulations which will come up?
You see, this is a kind of the initiatives taken by the central government. And as you know, it's a work in progress when it comes to, because as I said, the energy landscape is a dynamic landscape which is changing practically on daily basis. Which means that these changes now, the regulators, whether you are the central regulators or the state regulators and other government of India agencies, state government agencies, non-governmental agencies, and banks, etc., they can come out with their own policy initiatives so that, which are basically in sync with the central government amendments which have been brought in. So these are kind of the mother initiatives. But that doesn't mean that things stop there. Now the states can take their own initiative, regulators can take their own initiative and bring about the kind of changes and amendments which are required, or introduce new bills or introduce new acts and so on and so forth. So idea is that this is the guiding this thing. The changes have been brought, but as I said, that it depends on where you are, which state you are in, what you need to do, so that you can come out with your own changes as well. So you are going to see along the time, this may be amended further, new changes may also come in the central rules and regulation, but at the same time, as I said, the beginning has been made, and it's a very strong beginning. The message has been sent across the whole world. India is committed to new energy. India is committed to green energy while we are expanding our economy, making sure energy available to every Indian. But at the same time, we are in sync with the way world thinks. So in fact, in these areas, for instance, the parliament sending this message to, of course, the whole world, that look, we are already ahead. India is not only moving ahead or not only talking, we are actually walking the talk. Many developed countries have yet to kind of bring over the kind of changes that our parliament has already brought in. So this is a kind of convey to the world, look, we are talking, but we are also walking. Unlike many developed countries, they only talk. They have yet to start walking.
Mr. Taneja, I'm sure you will agree that, this requires a lot of coordination between the central government and the states. And more specifically, those states which has a different party in power. Because at times, the state government and the central government are not on the same page. So don't you think that coordination has to be really extraordinary to bring out the actual result?
I think when you look at it, for instance, the debate in Parliament, both in Lok Sabha earlier and in Rajya Sabha yesterday, I think I was kind of, as a person specializing in energy, I was satisfied in the sense that there were, of course, points were made, but at the same time, by and large, majority of parties decided to go along with the reforms. So one hopes that the state governments will also do the same. At the end of the day, we are talking mainly about the renewables here, mainly talking about non-fossil kind of, energy, where the role of states is very, very important. And if they want the welfare of the people, make sure that the, people have better quality of air, better quality of water, better quality of ground, then it's important that, go along with these kind of things. But that said, at the same time, as I said, this is a work in progress. We have basically two major challenges. On one hand, to expand the green space, expand the green energy, but at the same time, we have to make sure we have a large number of people who are still energy poor, who still don't have access to sufficient amount of affordable energy, that we are also expanding the energy space so that more and more people have, for instance, access to energy. LPG is a major revolution in the country. LED was a major revolution. So I think it's a work in progress. Along the way, state government would have to come along and may launch their own initiative. I'm pretty confident that we will see major number of initiatives, because at the end of the day, if you are a political party, you have to work for the people and work for the health of the people.
Mr. Taneja, you track the energy sector so closely. I want to bring in this point that in the last couple of months, 5-6 months, we have seen consistently electric vehicles registration crossing that 1 lakh mark. It includes all two-wheelers, three-wheelers and passenger cars. So isn't that a very encouraging and healthy sign that, people are increasingly switching over from conventional petrol and diesel vehicles to EVs?
Yes, electric vehicles is the future. We as a society, we as a country are moving now towards the age of electricity, where even for cooking, hopefully in 15 years from now, we'll be using electricity more than, for instance, the fossil fuel. Right now, every single household is using fossil fuel for cooking. But I think in 15 years, the landscape would change dramatically. But for that, we need to produce more energy, more electricity. And how do we do that? That's the real challenge. Right now, we use mainly fossil fuels to produce electricity. But now, with the expansion of solar and hopefully very soon offshore wind and all that, probably the share of renewables energy as a whole will go up. But as I said, this is a work which has to be done both by the center, the state governments and the private sector and the communities as a whole. It's a huge task. As I said, it's a very good move that more and more people are buying EVs or electric vehicles, and this is only going to grow. But at the same time, we have to make sure that affordable and cheap electricity is available for the intended or the projected EV revolution is coming. But I think we should be focusing more at the same time that electricity is available. And I personally feel that this transition from fossil fuel to renewables in terms of generating electricity is going to be a long haul thing. It's not going to happen soon. Some countries may happen in 10 years, 20 years. But in case of India, I think it's going to be a very long journey, maybe 30 years or 40 years.
Mr. Taneja, the bill also empowers the centre to specify a carbon credit trading scheme, which you made a mention in the beginning as well. But don't you think we need to have a formal regulator for the sector?
Well, I think eventually, yes. But the question is that whether you can need a central regulator or you need one commercial regulator or you need regulated various, at the level of the state government, since we are such a vast country. I think at the beginning has been made. This is going to be again a long journey. And also both the governments and the consumers and other stakeholders will have a lot to learn. the world is actually learning. In some places, we have to make sure that the interests of the ordinary consumers are protected. And some people are not the rich, especially the big conglomerates, whether in India or overseas, they don't exploit it to their advantage and to the disadvantage of the ordinary consumer. So I think that along the way, you're going to see the government putting in place, more infrastructure. It can be policy infrastructure. It can be setting up regulators, whether in states or at the center or at both, or maybe non-government regulators at the same time. So I think that remains to be seen. But the government have taken the first serious steps in that direction. And I think in coming years, we're going to see more steps being taken in that direction.
Mr. Taneja, the amendments in the bill will also have an impact on the building code of the country, and the new buildings which are to come up will have to comply with them. We already know of, eco-friendly buildings and buildings which consume much less power, whether it is for lighting or for air conditioning or for other purposes. So will these provisions make it mandatory for the new buildings to have certain percentage of their energy requirement from other sources other than, fossil fuel, like maybe solar or wind?
Well, that way, you see, the idea probably is in the direction of the major commercial buildings and housing societies and major residential condominiums. That is, can start with that. Those are mostly built by corporates or companies, so that, one can start with that and then it can trickle down further. But I think the initial approach is to at least those which are construction in the organized sector. It can start with that. It can start right from the how do you make cement and how do you make steel for housing, how do you transport it, how do you build the infrastructure for that, etc., and taking it down to the buildings. So idea is basically to come up with a kind of mechanism so that, the whole process can be made as green as possible. But initial target is basically more in the organized sector constructing, commercial buildings, residential blocks, office complexes and so on and so forth, and also industries, of course. Initial idea is to go with that, and then along the way, this, as you know, once you do that at that level, it trickles down to others. It takes some time, but it does trickle down if you go by the history and the evidence.
Let's also talk about the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, BEE. In the past couple of years, BEE label has been made mandatory, whether it is 3-star, 4-star or 5-star ratings for, home appliances predominantly. In times to come, and with these amendments making an enabling environment, can we expect for other equipment also, industrial equipments, scientific equipments being used in schools, colleges, universities and factories to comply with BEE norms?
Well, you see, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, first of all, needs to be expanded. As you know, the responsibility they will have to share is going to be huge. As you know, India is basically preparing for the commitment made by India at the Paris COP summit. The idea is that, those are the commitments made to the international community. And moreover, we are a densely populated country and we recognize that climate crisis is real. So the government is moving in that direction, to, of course, to comply with the commitments made. But at the same time, since we are a densely populated country, make sure the health of the people is kind of prioritized. So that's the agenda. Now, for all that, you rightly mentioned, we have seen, for instance, the LED revolution in the country, as I mentioned. It's a massive revolution. In fact, the other countries are now descending on India and trying to learn how we manage that. The same will come practically everything that either consumes energy or produces energy or is part of the, the energy system will have to come under that. But there are millions and millions of things, in this. So eventually everything will be covered to make sure that they are complying with this thing as the country complies with the international protocols. So it's a long journey, as I said, especially in case of our country. But as I said, the beginning has been made, act has been passed, further amendments may also come, and along the way we will see this transition being fast-tracked to the extent possible. But as I said, and India said that, it's only by 2070 that we are going to meet the commitment when it comes to lowest possible emissions or zero emission as some people, etc. But when you look at the reforms and the track record, India today is doing better than most developed countries. We hope the global north or the rich world will recognize that and the commitment they have made to emerging economies like India in terms of mobilizing capital and technology so that we can move faster, that they will do that. So far, they have refused to walk their talk. They promise $100 billion every year. And its total amount which is due actually, and they owe to the developing countries more than $1 trillion. What they have given is only $20 billion. So they have a huge, huge commitment and they have to walk. But we are already walking.
Mr. Taneja, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on objectives and key provisions of Energy Conservation Amendment Bill. The participants were Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and S. Rangabhashyam, EIR correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on a mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on a YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.